Welcome to the Stark Reflections on Writing and Publishing podcast. There has never been a better time for writers. More information, options, and opportunities are available to you, but navigating these requires insight. Join Mark Leslie Lefebvre as he draws upon more than a quarter century of experience as a writer, a bookseller, and a trusted book industry consultant to explore and reflect on the writing and publishing landscape to help you make informed choices on your writer journey.
It happens to writers all the time, doesn't it? We come up with more than one title for a work and we keep kicking it around back and forth. In this particular case, it's the title for this episode of the Stark Reflections podcast. Hi, I'm Mark Leslie Lefebvre, and I'm your host. The topic is going to be something that we all know, something that we all hear, something that is repeatedly beat into our heads over and over and over, yet sometimes we still have a giant blind spot to it. It's the cover for your book. And just because I've preached about it for longer than self-publishing has been a thing, remember, my tour of duty in self-publishing started in 2004, about 10 years before all the cool kids were doing it. But this doesn't mean that I haven't been guilty of it. Hell, it doesn't mean I'm not still guilty of it. And so in this episode, I walk through two personal examples because it's often easier when looking at someone else's work, someone else's blind spot, in order to illustrate that critical thing we all forget. So I was going to call this episode a Tale of Two Covers, since I go through examples using two different covers. But then I was thinking about the name of a slide that I used at a recent conference where I went through the lessons I learned in 25 years of writing, publishing, and bookselling. So I had this series of slides in order, and they were called, the first one was called It's Not You, It's Me. Now this was about rejection, and something I talked about in detail in episode 33. And then I had a slide called It's Not I, It's Your Lack of Proper Editing. And I think the topic of that should be obvious. And then the last one was It's Not Me, It's Your Book Cover. So playing on that last one, I thought maybe that title might be more effective, even though I will walk through stories about two covers. Maybe I'll compromise. Maybe I'll call this It's Not Me, It's Your Book Cover, with the subtitle, A Tale of Two Covers. In any case, I walk through some mistakes I made, the things I learned, and the makeover process, and that is the core part of this episode. Okay, now time for a brief personal update. So last week, I think I mentioned I received a check for $9.21 from Listen Up Audiobooks for sales from the audiobook Evasion, which they had produced and distribute for me. And then earlier this week, I received a direct deposit from Findaway Voices, who are the sponsor for this episode, and it was for $57.47 US, or translated to Canadian dollars, $74.10. There were a number of line items on my invoice for Findaway Voices for ACX, which is Audible and iTunes distribution. Then there were three sources of income in total, which were ACX, Biblioteca, and Playster. But about 75% of that money I earned in this past month from Findaway Voices came from Playster. Again, not one of the places people think about. People only think about Audible, but I've been making most of my money from Biblioteca, Playster, and other sources that most indie authors aren't talking about when it comes to audiobooks. So I find that interesting. Also, neither of these is a major amount of money, but it's nearly $100 Canadian this month from audiobooks alone. And in 2018 so far, I've earned over $300 US, which actually when translated comes to more than $400 Canadian from Findaway Voices for my audiobooks. And 3 of the 4 audiobooks aren't even full-length novels. They're either 10 or 15,000 word short stories or short story collections. Now, $300 US isn't going to change my life, but it's a nice addition to my existing ebook sales, so I'll take it as part of growing and expanding the base for where my income as a writer is coming in. Now, if you want to learn how you can take full advantage of Findaway Voices for the creation of and or the distribution of your audiobook, check out starkreflections.ca/findaway. In other news, I also ran a Written Word Media promo, and Written Word Media is the company that owns FreeBooksy and BargainBooksy, and I did interview Ricky from Written Word Media several episodes back. You can listen to that. I'll post a link in the show notes. But I ran a Written Word Media promo on my novel, A Canadian Werewolf in New York. So this book was submitted and was accepted as part of a Kobo promo. So it's part of Kobo's new partnership with Walmart. So they have this deal and a deal page. And that promo is running from August 21st to September 17th. So for the promo, when I submitted it, I dropped the price from $5.99 US to $1.99 US. I made it $1.99 in Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and £1.99 in Great Britain as well for the month, so I could be in that promo. And of course, I didn't just drop the price on Kobo, because when you drop your price on any retailer, you have to drop it on all retailers. So I went to Kindle and I dropped the price there, and I went to Draft to Digital where I dropped the price for Nook and iBooks, etc. And I also have it on Google Play. Not that I've seen many sales there, but I have it on Google Play, so I dropped the price there as well. But coming back to Kobo, so I know how some of the carousels on the Kobo promos work, and I thought I'd try to help myself out, not just submit it to the promo, but just give it a little bit of extra push. So the way a carousel of books works on Kobo is it shows 6 books on that first page or that first carousel, and there's a little button where you could scroll to the right and you see the next 6, and then you click it again, you see the next 6, and there's usually 4 or 5 pages like that of carousels before you get to this see all the books link, which will bring you to what looks more like a search result. And there can be hundreds of books in a promo like that. At Kobo, these are called lists. And while there are multiple ways that merchandisers can set up lists, the default way that they usually use for these lists are dynamic and are based on sales ranking. Thus, when it's based on that, the most popular books filter to the front or top of that list. Now, that often bothered me, particularly since it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you only show the most popular books, they all at the top, they'll always stay at the top, because usually the books on the first page are more likely to be clicked and bought, and so it's just the same books that end up being at the top of the list, which can be really, really frustrating when multiple lists are built that way. The books on pages 2, 3, and 4 have less of a chance to sell from that list, and the ones at the bottom of the 200, well, good luck with that. Yes, it's still included, and yes, it feeds the algorithms and it's more likely to sell, but it's nowhere near the volume of being at the top of the list. So rather than get frustrated and maintain frustration with something like that, I thought I'd use it to my advantage. So when I started, the carousel didn't even have Canadian Werewolf in New York on it, because the sales weren't that great. I think you had to click on the See More books, and you had to scroll several pages in before you got to my book, and that was on the U.S. launch deals page that they had for the Walmart U.S. Kobo partnership launch. So I guess knowing this and assuming that this is what they might do, because they do have multiple ways of setting up these lists, but I assume they would do it that way because it's pretty much a default. And seeing absolutely no sales in the US for Canadian Werewolf for the first few days of the promo, I scheduled a third-party hit. I planned this in advance. I actually figured it would happen this way. So I scheduled a third-party hit to get me more attention and increase my ranking on Kobo in the US. I booked a Written Word Media Deal of the Day promo for Canadian Werewolf for August 28th. Now, the Deal of the Day typically costs twice as much or quite a bit more than just a regular promo, but I wanted that extra visibility. So it costs $80, or it cost me $80 to book this deal. And so far, I've only earned about $60 back from that promo, but it has helped me achieve my intended goal. In Kobo's US store, Canadian Werewolf is ranking in the top 5 of its categories. It's sitting at number 2 in fiction and literature horror, science fiction and fantasy horror, and fiction and literature humorous. Those are the 3 categories. This morning, this is Thursday the 30th, it's sitting at number 2. But more importantly, on the Walmart Launch Deals landing page, under the Discover Brand New Worlds in these ebooks, and under the Find a New Favorite with these indie books, it's ranked as the first book on the far left. So it's on the first carousel page, and it is on the far left. It's basically the first book on those lists. So if there's ever a big push via Walmart to that landing page, between now and the 17th of September when this promo is over, i.e. if they get a huge volume of traffic there, I'll be in a good spot for selling a few more books. Now, it takes selling in huge volumes to rank on Kobo in Canada. Even though I've had some sales in Kobo Canada for that title, it's ranking in the mid to high 2000s for all three of those same categories that I mentioned above. But on Kobo US, you only need to sell a handful of copies in order to rank high. I'm hoping that now that I have this pole position, that I'm able to maintain it throughout the month of the promo. Of course, any of the titles, from indie authors that get a BookBub or a Bargain Booksy or some other promo will likely, in the meantime, knock me out of my top spot. And that's why I've spent a bit of time in the last day or so seeing if I could book a few more of those smaller, i.e. non-BookBub style promo sites for the title to see if I can keep it ranked high, hopefully still on the first or second page of the carousel to leverage visibility for the Walmart promo, and we'll see how that goes. Now, some of the basic information that I just talked about this promo appears in the show notes for episode 36 on starkreflections.ca. And if you're a patron of the show, I'll give you access to the full details, the actual details and numbers that I spoke about, so you can actually look at the charts in more detail, etc. And if you're interested, you can have access to this and more additional content for as little as $1 a month via patreon.com/starkreflections. But that's it for my personal update. Let's move on to this frank discussion we have to have, you and I. We need to sit down. Because seriously, it's not you, it's me. Well, okay, it's not me. It's your book cover, and we need to talk about it. Okay, so the first cover story I'm going to tell you about. Cover story, that's cute, isn't it? Kind of like this is a magazine and that was a story that was on the never mind. I get sidetracked so easily. The first story about these Tale of Two Covers is going to be for a ebook release for a short story I wrote called Spirits. Now, Spirits was a 6,000 word love story with a ghost. There's a bit of a backstory here that I think may be intriguing for writers. If you haven't heard it, if you have heard it, go ahead and skip the next couple minutes. But Spirits is the short story I had written. It's a tale of two young lovers who are caught up in this legend of the Phoenix Baby, which is this ghostly crying that haunts a repertory theater in the city of Ottawa, Ontario. And as they unravel the mystery, they find themselves becoming inextricably entangled in the old building itself. So it's basically a love story with a ghost, or a ghostly presence. And it basically opens up with the line that people who haven't died can still leave their spirits behind. And that's sort of the premise of the story. And at the time I wrote this, I was at a point in my career where I refused to accept less than 5 to 6 cents US a word, which are the professional rates for a short story. And so I was only sending it to markets that were paying that much. And I was getting the best rejections you can ever imagine. So I would send this to a horror market, and it would be, great story, but it's not scary enough for this particular market. Good luck with it elsewhere. I would send it to, try to send it to some markets that specialized in romance, but it didn't have all the, standard romance tropes that I know now about that are important. And I would say it's a great story, but there's not enough romance. There's not enough of those elements to satisfy our readers, and we're not too fond of the ghosty thing. And then I would try, a literary market, because maybe just like magic realism or some of these other literary movements. So I'd send it to contemporary fiction editor, and they'd say it's a great story, but there's too much schmaltzy romance and not enough paranormal, or too much paranormal, I should say. And anyways, I continued to get these amazing rejections. So again, I'd been holding out for pro rates for fiction market it was about 10 years of in the early days, packaging this up, paying for the cost of shipping and sending it off. And my goal with a 6,000 word short story was to make 2,000, yeah, that'd be nice, $250 to $300 on the sale of the story. But it seemed to be just a little bit too long for most of the markets that were pro rate, so I couldn't send it to some of the markets. And I realized that, I'd spent tons of money on self-addressed stamped envelopes and shipping this off to markets in those early days. So I thought it's not going to make money in a drawer, and digital publishing was this new thing. I had a Kindle Direct Publishing account, and I had a Smashwords account because this was 2011. I still hadn't moved over to Kobo to create Kobo Writing Life, so it didn't exist. The best way to get into Kobo was through a place like Smashwords. So I did this thing, and I checked the date on it, and I have a link on the starkreflections.ca to my blog post, markleslie.blogspot.com, on in June 2011, where I talked about this book launch. So I did this virtual book launch for Spirits as an ebook on Friday, June 3rd, 2011. And I made a note in the blog post. Now there's a link to Ustream which I'd used for this, and that is no longer valid. The video is no longer there, so I thought it would be fun to watch. I did have a screenshot from my blog, which I'll share in my own show notes here. 18 people watched it directly, and it was actually linked to my author page on Facebook, and I have no idea how many people watched it. But the cover itself, I basically, it was a friend of mine who's a brilliant photographer. I found this amazing picture he had used. They'd taken in a hallway somewhere, and it's a shadow. And it was a shadow of him, and one of the characters in this story is a tall, gangly, shadowy figure. And I thought, when I looked at this image, I thought, this is a perfect image. I like this. This speaks to me. And the cover basically has spirits in this particular font that I had leveraged. Has my name on the bottom, in line with one of the shadows on the wall. And there's this tall, gangly figure sort of leaning against a wall, and you can see the shadow of the wall. And it says, people who haven't died can still leave their spirit in a place. But I designed the cover myself, and even though it was a great photograph, it didn't really speak to the type of story that it was, and in all honesty, it wasn't the greatest cover in the world. It was, one of my early attempts at a cover. So I did it. I slapped everything together. I did it really, really fast. I did the launch, and in June 2011, here were my sales. On Amazon, I sold 14 copies of the book, and I made $4.90. And on Smashwords, or through Smashwords to Kobo and the other places, iBooks, Nook, I sold 5 units and I made $2.80. But if you go to starkreflections.ca, you will see the original version of the cover, and it kind of sucked. I liked it. I thought it was neat. It worked really, really well. But I don't think it spoke to the actual story outside of the thing that was kicking around in my head, because I knew what was going on in the story. So I then invested a little bit of money in purchasing an image and then retrying the cover design, figuring a bit more of an investment would help out. And probably a month or so later, I'm trying to remember the exact date, but I redid the cover, and there's spirits. There's this wonderfully haunting image of a man and a woman back to back, and it's their shadows, and it's just on this sort of gray wall. So it kind of has this angst, love, and shadowiness that's kind of part of this story, and works really, really well. And then you have spirits up vertically on the left-hand side of the screen, and then sort of a shadow version, or a mirror shadow version of spirits, sort of reflected on the far side of the cover, kind of draws the eyes in to the couple. At the very top, it says a haunting love story. And then it has my name, and then it has the people who haven't died can still leave their spirit behind. My sales immediately went up as soon as I replaced the cover, because got to remember, this is back in the early days where you could even make money off of a shitty cover. I did make a bit of money off a shitty cover, but when I got a less shitty cover, a better cover, I made more money. So when I did a study to what I had ended up making in that first year, or in that first 12 months, because I had been working at Kobo later, and I published an article on my blog about that. I sold 18 units on Amazon for $6.38, and through Smashwords, obviously Kobo and iBooks and Nook, I sold 68 units and I made $39.99, which meant I sold a total of 87 units in that first year, and I made $46.37. So that's how I did in the first year. It's now 2018. I have made roughly $300 off of Spirits. Actually, probably a little bit more, because Spirits has now been included in Nocturnal Screams, the series of books that I've put out. And so it's really hard to amortize what I've made, but roughly about $300 that I've made on it so far. And again, that was an illustration of money not making a story not making money in a drawer, and leveraging digital publishing. But it was also a study of how much I learned about you could sell some maybe with a crappy cover, but you could sell even more with an actual decent cover that's more speaking towards the target audience. Of course, that experience was 2011. Obviously, I've grown more and I know way more now in 2018 than I knew then. But the second tale I'm going to share of the two covers is related to another short thing that I put together called Snowman Shivers. And it was not just a cover update, but it was also a cover update and a subtitle update. And this was actually based on doing something, again, that I tell people never to do. I actually paid attention to something in one or two of the reviews that I saw posted for Snowman Shivers. So Snowman Shivers, just a bit of a backstory. It's a collection of two snowman-themed tales, dark humor stories, actually. And it was originally, I think when I first published it, it was 99 cents or $2.99. But I've long since, first publishing it, long since been using it as a perma-free title. Well, perma-free everywhere, and on Amazon in the US, but I don't think it's price matched in Canada on Amazon, or too many places beyond the US, because they can be dicks that way sometimes. But in any case, it's one of those perma-free titles, so it's meant to be a free funnel into my writing, in particular into my short fiction, because I have quite a bit of short fiction published out there. I have One Hand Screaming, I have Bumps in the Night, I have Active Reader, and I have the Nocturnal Scream series, the collection of short fiction. So it was an experimental short ebook, and I put it up originally in December of 2012. So again, I had been working on, but hadn't yet launched Kobo Writing Life, so it didn't exist yet. So I put it up directly to Amazon via KDP, and I published it to Kobo and iBooks and Nook via Smashwords. So what I had done, again, I'd taken a photograph from a friend of mine. I'd use that photograph for the basis of the image. It's this beautiful snowy landscape, because again, it's the snow, it's the etc. I called it Snowman Shivers, Scary Snowman Tales. And if you take a look at starkreflections.ca for episode 36 for the show notes, you'll see I have this wonderfully cool blue color with Mark Leslie and a really kind of eerie, sort of snowy, eerie font, Snowman Shivers, Scary Snowman Tales. And you've got this white, very stark white image of this beautiful snow-covered trees. But then again, I mean, when you look at it, you're like, yeah, okay, sure. Maybe not the best cover. But there were two things about this. So the cover wasn't ideal. And again, when I was looking at images for covers, I was looking at, like Calvin and Hobbes' weird, funny snowman style images. I was looking at pictures of scary snowman, and again, I never ended up purchasing any of the images for the Scary Snowman, because they were just too macabre, too gross, and these stories weren't. But I made a mistake. So let me first talk about the subtitle, Scary Snowman Tales. And this is a thing you tell people never to do, unless you can do it with your big boy pants on, or your big girl pants on. Looking at a review is really depressing, and is something to recommend. Don't look at the reviews. But I had noticed one or two of the reviews, I think on Amazon or Goodreads, for Snowman Shivers, there was nothing scary about these stories at all. They weren't actually scary, they were dark humor. And apart from the eeriness maybe of what you're experiencing, you know what? That's true. They're not scary snowman tales, they're dark humor snowman tales. So I thought it was important to stop the false advertising. If somebody wanted a terrifying story of a snowman, they weren't going to get it here. They were going to get creepy, eerie, dark humor, but not scary. So I had to remove that because, that was false advertising, and maybe people who are picking this up, yes, for free, were going to be a little bit more critical because they weren't scary. So good point there. So I revised it to be very, very explicit, and the subtitle is, and this is actually on the cover of the new version of the book, 2 short dark humor tales about snowmen. 2 short dark humor tales about snowmen. So against false advertising, it's not a full book. You're downloading this book for free. It's going to be 2 short dark humor tales about snowmen. So hopefully that's less false advertising and people actually know what they're going to get. And the revised cover, again, I designed it, so I did this myself. And this one didn't cost me anything but a little bit of time because a few years ago I had taken a photograph of a snowman, and it's a humorous picture of a snowman that's just eaten a child, and you can see the legs of the child sticking out the child's mouth. And I'd taken it in the house right beside my mom's in Northern Ontario, in Levack, Ontario. And I used that photo. I sort of colorized it a little bit. I added some filters to it. And then I just went with, again, a similar blue backdrop for the top, the photo. And snowman and shivers. Shivers was done in a white font, and my name in large letters. And I changed that up on not too long ago, just earlier this summer. And interestingly enough, this is the thing that I found. So if you take a look and you go back to July of a year's time on Kindle, you go back to July of 2017. You see, I had 1 download of Snowman Shivers, and then in August of 2017, I had 1 download of Snowman Shivers. And then in September of 2017, I had 2. And then it kind of ramps up because my titles tend to become more and more popular. People are looking for my books usually in Halloween, in October, because I get stuff on local television. I usually have a new book from Dundurn out. And I'm doing the speaking gigs as a scary guy. And so that's where there is a bit more visibility that happens organically in October. So in October there was 10 downloads, November 14, then December 8 downloads. In January 2018 I had 2. And then I always, in the springtime, I always start to do some social media push and promo using the spring theme. And so that's why February it goes up to 22 downloads, and March it was 19, and then April it's 18. On April 6th, the very first Free Friday Frights that I did, where I do a live reading of a story to my Facebook page, and then I also post the story for free on markleslie.ca/freefridayfrights. I had done that old silk hat they found, which is one of the stories, and so got a little bit of traction there, kind of maintained some of that traction. I thought, April, spring, may as well talk about this story. But then it wasn't until July, end of June, beginning of July, when I actually changed the cover and put in this professional cover. And I also happened to run a free Booksy ad for this. And so this, on Kindle alone, I was just sharing the Kindle numbers because it was easy to just go to one platform and look at it. You can see I went from, an average of, 20 or so books a month to almost 1,500 books once I changed the cover, and I ran a free Booksy. But it was interesting. I noticed on Kobo and Kindle, no, not on Kobo because I didn't have access to that, but on Kindle, even right after I changed the cover without doing any promo, I'd started to get, where I was getting an average of 1 or 2 a week, it started to ramp up all on its own just by changing the cover. Then when I hit it with the free Booksy, it went really, really well. In terms of August, as of earlier this week when I grabbed the numbers, I was at 82 so far. I think it's closer to 90 now, because again, I'm getting a handful of people downloading this every day. Just quickly, I just took a quick boo over at Smashwords because this is one that's published still to Kobo via Smashwords, and I'll get into that in just a second. I took a look at it, and what you can see, and I'll put this in the show notes at starkreflections.ca, you can actually see that, where I was getting an average of maybe 1 or 2 a week, suddenly when I changed the cover, the downloads went up significantly, and then a few weeks later when I ran the free Booksy promo, it went up again. Now, just related to that Smashwords thing to Kobo, I just wanted to share this because it's kind of important if you're publishing to Kobo via Kobo Writing Life and you have titles you want to move over. I'm also going to be moving it from Smashwords directly to Kobo distribution. I actually started that process. Now, I'd been holding off moving that title because it had a great history of ratings and reviews. It had over 77 or something like that ratings and reviews on Kobo, and I didn't want to lose them because when you add a new title and you publish direct, it creates a completely new record for that, and the reviews and ratings disappear. They're gone. They're still stuck on the old book. Something I'd worked on when I was at Kobo, and the Kobo Writing Life team finally has a way to do this properly. They have a way to preserve them and get them transferred from book A to book B. It's a process that takes a while. But they posted about this process on one of their help forums in the last few weeks. So I made some screenshots, etc., and documented how I did it. And then I initiated the process. Now, there's a walkthrough of this. It'll be posted in my show notes, so you can check it out if you were interested in doing that yourself. And again, it does take several weeks, so don't expect it to happen overnight. And they'll let you know when it's done. But this will allow me now for Snowman Shivers to run direct Kobo Writing Life promos, like the free pages and stuff like that I couldn't do when it was published through Smashwords. So I'll be able to more easily monitor and see my sales, at least, for Kindle and Kobo. I'm leaving it pub to iBooks and Nook via Smashwords, again, because it has history, ratings, rankings. And again, Smashwords was always there for me, and I want to keep titles posted through Smashwords because I think they're an important platform, and I want to support them as well. But I'm just removing the Kobo link to it to do it direct. So that's it for a look at the covers, looking at Spirits and looking at Snowman Shivers. This is an example, and I love using myself as an example because it's really, really easy to point at someone else's stuff and say, this is crap and this is no good. It's really, really difficult to look at your own stuff and look at it with an honest eye and say, yeah, I guess this is okay, but maybe it could be better. Because it's really hard to call your own stuff crap unless you're in one of those moods that writers often get in. But that's neither here nor there. What I'm saying is, it's okay to look back at something you did and something that you were proud of doing and realize that you're better today or you understand it better today than you did before. So as an example, Snowman Shivers, Scary Snowman Tales, that works for me really, really well because I write scary things and I'm a horror writer. But then when I realized, when I actually did the analysis and actually looked at the response that some people had to it, they said they're not scary, and that annoyed them as readers, and I don't want to do that to the readers. So not only did I readapt and find covers that I think are a little bit more in line with the stories themselves, but I even changed the subtitle and obviously the descriptions as well to try and match that. I didn't get into the descriptions because this is more about covers, but it's important to take a fresh look at that. I know there are other covers of mine that are not ideal, that are not perfect, and I'm going to work through them one by one. There are some covers that I have, for example, that may not be exactly perfect for the target market, but that's because there's other factors affecting that. There's some continuity and some crossover readership that I'm hoping to appeal to. And that's one of the reasons why in some of the books that I've published, I've kind of pushed the covers in a little bit off to the left rather than dead center of where it should be. But again, it's all part of experimenting. It's all part of trying different things. It's all part of recognizing when you've made a mistake and realizing, owning up to that mistake and moving forward. Hopefully that helped you, and hopefully looking at some of my own examples helped you understand that from your own perspective. Again, this is Mark Leslie Lefebvre. You're listening to the Stark Reflections on Writing and Publishing podcast. Because this whole episode was me being reflective, I'm not going to do a reflection at the end because it's not like I just finished an interview with some amazing person. I finished talking to myself. And you already got the reflections, I hope. So thanks for joining me in this episode of the Stark Reflections podcast. I hope you enjoyed that. If you enjoyed it, please feel free to share it with someone you think might benefit from it, or leave a review for it. We appreciate all the reviews that I've been getting. I appreciate all the Patreon supporters that I have. Thank you guys so much. And I appreciate you for listening to the podcast. I hope you enjoyed this one. Hope you got something out of it. And I hope you come back for episode 37 next week. Until then, it's Mark Leslie Lefebvre wishing you great writing and good Stark Reflections.
Thank you for listening to the Stark Reflections podcast. You can find show notes for each episode at starkreflections.ca.
The music for this podcast, Laser Groove, was composed and produced by Kevin MacLeod. Check out more of Kevin's great music at incomtech.com.